Now today we're going to talk about the cerebrum. Now we're going to be looking at the different lobes of the outer surface of the brain and some of its main folds. Now, when you look at the brain, the first thing you'll probably notice is that the surface is highly folded. This is the part of the brain known as the cerebrum, which contains the cerebral cortex and is part of the forebrain. The folds on the surface of the brain are called sulci, which means a ditch, while the ridges between the sulci are called gyri, or sulcus and gyrus are the singular. The pattern of gyri and sulci can be highly variable in an individual brain, but there are certain ones that are pretty well fixed, and they define the regions or lobes of the cerebrum, which in turn define different functions. Now we shall look first at the lateral surface of the cerebrum, and the first sulci we shall look at are the central sulcus and the lateral sulcus. The central sulcus extends from the superior surface of the cerebrum at the junction with the medial surface. This is the so-called superomedial border, and it runs diagonally down the lateral surface, ending at or near the lateral sulcus. At the upper end, the central sulcus continues round the superomedial border to end on the medial surface of the cerebrum. Now, as you shall see later, this sulcus is the junction between the frontal and parietal lobes of the brain. The gyri immediately anterior and posterior to the central sulcus are called the precentral and postcentral gyri. The precentral gyrus is bounded on the anterior side by the precentral sulcus, while the postcentral gyrus is bounded by the postcentral sulcus. These two gyri are the location of the primary motor and primary somatosensory cortices, respectively. Below, or inferior to, the lateral sulcus is the temporal lobe, which has three gyri: the superior, middle, and inferior temporal gyri. The superior temporal gyrus is the location of the primary auditory cortex. On the medial surface of the brain there are several important sulci and gyri. The calcarine sulcus extends from the most posterior region of the brain, the occipital pole, to join the parieto-occipital sulcus, which forms the boundary between the parietal and occipital lobes. The combined sulcus then continues on, ending just below the splenium of the corpus callosum. The region either side of the calcarine sulcus is the primary visual cortex. The cingulate gyrus wraps round the corpus callosum and is bounded by the callosal sulcus and the cingulate sulcus. This structure is very important in the limbic system and our learning mechanisms. The final major structure to look at is the longitudinal fissure. When you look down the brain from above, you can see that it is separated into two hemispheres. The longitudinal fissure is a deep cleft that separates the two hemispheres of the brain. It extends from the anterior to the posterior of the brain and defines the position of the midline. The surface of the cerebrum can be divided into four separate functional units, known as the lobes. Now, while the functional distinction between these four lobes is not absolute, it gives us a way of talking about the different regions of the cerebrum, which makes it somewhat easier to understand. The frontal lobe is defined as the cerebrum forward of the central sulcus, to its extremity, the frontal pole. The frontal lobe is part of the brain which is most heavily associated with decision-making and with high cognitive function. Sitting posterior to the central sulcus lies the parietal lobe, which forms part of the upper and lateral surfaces of the cerebrum. It extends back from the central sulcus to the parieto-occipital sulcus. This is part of the cerebrum that is associated with somatosensation and integrative processing. The occipital lobe is the most posterior part of the cerebrum. It is defined as the region from the parieto-occipital sulcus to the tentorium cerebelli, double fold of dura mater that separates the cerebellum from the cerebrum, and forward to the pre-occipital notch. This region of the cerebrum is concerned with vision. The temporal lobe forms the lateral wing of the cerebrum. It extends from the ventral surface of the brain, at the pre-occipital notch, to the ventral extent of the frontal and parietal lobes at the lateral sulcus. This region of the cerebrum is closely associated with learning and memory mechanisms, auditory processing, and language. And there we have it. While the brain looks as though it's just a random black box, it really isn't. Much like any large organisation, there are specific bits that do specific things that lets the whole organisation function as one. Our job now is to understand how it does it.